absolutely. But I just want to let you know what it's going to do their appointment.
All right, thank you everybody. If we could begin making our way to the seats. We are about halfway through. So now that we are about halfway through the agenda, some of the questions that were coming up before the break as far as testing protocols, as far as germplasm and seed procurement, we will have a couple presentations regarding that information here. So
I'll do this, yeah. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to move on to the next agenda item, as Eric mentioned, with industrial hemp seed and plant importation requirements. So as people are making their way back into the room, I'll just have a very brief overview of what we have on this, and then if there's additional discussion, we can open it up. But I did want to say, so we did contact the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, to try to have someone here, either someone here to discuss with us what the international and interstate importation requirements were for an industrial hemp seed, or to at the very least provide us with something that we could hand out to the board and the public. They were looking into it, but did not get back to me before the meeting. So hopefully as that progresses, we will hopefully have something in the future from the DEA. We do have a couple of contacts there that have been willing to try to look into information for us as best they can. And so we will continue to pursue that, and hopefully we'll be able to have some information for the board directly from them in the future. As I've mentioned previously, and as I've told people, California does not have any specific importation requirements with regards to industrial hemp. So, right now we have federal restrictions, and that's up to the DEA to administer those laws currently. So the only importation requirements that we could conceive of that could potentially be applicable would not necessarily so much be around seed, because we don't have any known quarantine pests or pathogens on hemp seed that we're concerned with coming into the state, or specific to hemp plants coming into the state. However, there are a few general requirements with regards to soil and just shipments in general that we want to make sure that people are aware of, so that way once it's possible to bring in material, and if it's authorized under federal law, if you're bringing it across state lines, here's what the border station staff are really going to be looking for. So there's a couple of things in general with regards to if plant material is coming in with soil. There are a few quarantines that include soil as a known host that you should be concerned with, including Japanese beetle. I believe this is burrowing and reniform nematodes. We have a nematode quarantine coming. These are each coming from certain states where these things are known to occur. There's an ozonium root rot quarantine, as well as a red imported fire ant quarantine. And soil, planting soil, is listed as a host, or as a method of vectoring those particular pests. And so as plant material in potting soil comes into the state, the staff are looking for those things. There are also a couple of additional quarantines on any shipment into the state, especially with regards to equipment coming from certain states. So gypsy moth, and I believe, there's a new, go for it.
Spotted lanternfly.
Spotted lanternfly. So both of those lay egg masses on equipment and buildings and basically anything they can find, including rocks, apparently. So as shipments come in through our border stations into the state, the staff are looking for egg masses of those things, and we want people to be aware that there are a few general pests of concern, but again, there's no pests of concern specific to industrial hemp yet. In all cases, for shipments coming into the state, again, if authorized under federal law, we do request that people shipping materials into the state please work with the origin Department of Agriculture on determining what phytosanitary requirements are required and what certification may be required to come into California. They can work with our staff and our pest exclusion branch. John is currently acting branch chief for the pest exclusion branch. We've got general information on the website and a general inbox and general phone number for you to call for information. We do ask you please try to work with the local origin departments of agriculture as well, so that way we can coordinate them and because they'll be familiar with whatever rules are required to ship into California, as most other states are very familiar with what's required to ship into California, since it's a pretty important point of the marketplace. So that's all that we were able to come up with, really, with regards to seed and plant importation requirements. Again, California doesn't have any specific rules, so it falls under federal law. And again, we were not able to get a presentation at this time for the board, or information specific from the DEA for the board at this time, but we will continue to pursue that. So that's the update I have on that item. I'll kick it over to Eric.
Does the board have any other discussion points around bringing in regards to that germplasm coming in to the state for this spring? Because really there's not much to talk about. We are right now in a state where Colorado was a couple of years ago, and Oregon, and just germplasm showed up and hemp fields were growing. So it's until we actually have definitions on what to watch out for, I'm learning that there really is nothing to define.
You want to open it to the public on any comments on this agenda item before we move on? No? We have one comment in the back there, or I saw someone.
The next part of this might answer some questions, and it might bring out some good questions, actually, is just to move on to subject matter number 6 here, in inviting Alex.
Did we want to start with Doug first, or Alex?
Oh, yes. I apologize, Alex. I'm sorry. We have a very special guest in the room. Flew all the way from Hawaii last night. He's been doing some very cool research with the University of Hawaii. Because some people in the state really want to abide by the federal protocols, I think it's very important that we learn and listen from someone who's kind of been down that route. He's a well-versed, very well-known author and speaker in this community, and so we've allotted him about 15 minutes, 20 minutes for his presentation. So I welcome Doug Fine.
So wherever you want, we'll have a mic. Either there's a mic there, or we've got a standing microphone, but if you wouldn't mind using it so that way everybody can hear you here and at home. And then, yeah, we've got the, if you just want to click anywhere, and it should get rid of that, hopefully. Or if you want, Valerie can move the things for you, too. There we go.
No worries. Can I slide advance on the...
Yeah, so you can slide.
Awesome. Great. And I'll use this one for the laser pointer. Thank you. Well, I really just want to express a tremendous amount of gratefulness to the board for wading through these issues. It has to be done. It can be thankless, and from seeing it done in other states, I know that it's important. When we look back at a multi-billion-dollar hemp industry in California, nationwide, in 20 years, I don't know how many people are going to be remembering the nuances here. But I thank you for holding these hearings and for having me here today. I also want to shout out to my family back home on the Funky Butte Ranch in New Mexico who's watching the feed. First, I'll give the hemp sign language, American Sign Language for hemp to everyone, and the I love you to my family wherever the cameras are. And I should say, I purposely put this up here because it's a plant-based plastic I got at the airport on my way back from planting in Hawaii, as Eric mentioned. Another potential hemp application. In addition to my work there, I'm also a consultant with the Colville Tribes of Washington and an entrepreneur who grew a farm-to-table hemp product that Eric and I had in our coffee this morning. So I've been deeply immersed in multiple states and involved in the regulatory process in multiple states. And what I'm going to focus on here in my time is independent farmer advocacy. The core of what I'd like to talk about is under the umbrella of level playing field, because I think it's good for California's economy and good for the world if big agriculture is part of hemp as well. To me, it's not either or. And specifically, what can most, in my view, and my experience as a farm entrepreneur, but also from all the projects I'm seeing nationwide and worldwide, what can most help independent farmers is very clear, easy access to genetics, as much access as possible to genetics. And the slides that I have here are primarily just to show how beautiful these crops look. So in Vermont, one of my projects, we developed over several years these genetics. And if you just look at these pictures, they're very, very nice looking plants. And great production. We're getting in our prime acreage, 1,000 pounds of seed per acre, very high, 34% protein content in it. And I'm delighted to say beginners like people are delighted with the product. And so going on to the next slide here, similarly, that's an above view. Look at the fiber, looked really good for that crop. Fiber is really up and coming. My puppy Isabella there with plants, nearly twice as tall as us, beside us, is the real reason I'm showing you these pictures. Now, in Washington State, which has one of the more restricted regulatory processes for genetics, the tribe, Colville tribe, was forced to import Monoecious European variety. And look at the difference mid-season there. I'm here saying, as Michael Pollan calls America's cannabis farmers the best farmers of his generation, I say let our farmers develop their genetics and let them own them so that we, with this new crop, have a new model that empowers farmers to not be enslaved to big seed companies if they don't want to be, but rather develop their genetics themselves and have a roadmap to certification that is a level playing field. There's precedent for this. Colorado has done this. It was an open game for a couple of years, and then they started their seed certification process. And when they released their, I can't remember, Eric may know, the number of varieties that were initially certified, it was split between established certified cultivars from offshore, from out of the country, and domestically developed cultivars. So I'm not advocating for a Wild West scenario, anything goes here. What I'm saying is, hopefully within the current law, maybe within the extension side of it, there will be a roadmap over, let's say, bring in your domestic cultivars, which is allowed under a federal omnibus provision, and the states that are making use of that are having no problem with it. We've provided our Vermont cultivars to multiple states that allow that. Allow those cultivars in for a couple of years to develop in the climate and then establish a regulatory process if people want to produce them commercially so that they can have those cultivars and it's a level playing field. Now, I heard earlier comments about the uniformity and the confidence that one gets from established certified seeds. I agree. I am not here to diss existing cultivars. In fact, some European cultivars, Canadian cultivars will grow great for people. People will want that brand name to know that every year they can reliably buy those cultivars every year and get a certification. I like the metaphor of jeans. Levi's jeans, to start with a J. You can't buy Levi's jeans and take the patch off, put your name on them, and call them your own. I think about clothes because my sweetheart made this hemp corduroy vest for me. But getting back to jeans with a G-E-N-E-S, if you are developing those cultivars yourself, you should be allowed to grow those cultivars and have a roadmap for domestically developed genetics to be part of that so that we see these robust cultivars. Multiple options is really what we're talking about here for me. That's the most important point that I wanted to make today. And thank you very much for the time, and I'm here for, oh, and I guess the last thing I'd say is if there is not a window or a roadmap available under the current guidelines, I'm afraid I have to urgently advocate for a legislative change, which I know is no small deal, but I'm here to speak for the independent farmer. Thank you very much. I stay here and there's questions.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, I actually, that's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, having Doug here is actually a pretty big deal for us in the hemp industry. Doug's been around this block quite a few times, actually. So, Doug, maybe from your humble opinion, based on your other things that you've done in states successfully, as far as everything you just mentioned, as far as seed, is that path, in your humble opinion, best done through the legislative rework to actually spell this out in writing for the betterment of farmers?
Great question, Eric. So I would say only if absolutely necessary. In other words, if when the board considers this matter and looks at it, and or when there's Attorney General opinions sought and received, if there is a way for me, so here's hypothetical. I won't include my own group in it. As a side note, I am not interested in becoming a genetic tycoon. I'm interested in getting good genetics out to farmers. So when we provide our, let's say, Vermont cultivars, we provide them at what we think is a fair price, but we provide a right of replication because we're not trying to do old models of agriculture. If people want to do that, that's fine. I think there's a market for it. But we want free farmers to be able to freely plant and replant seeds. If it's decided that there is an avenue, in other words, if an extension is empowered under the current legislative scenario in California to say, okay, farmer X in Oregon, you can, under this omnibus provision to the Farm Bill, many of you will know, it's a separate provision, not the Farm Bill provision, that says the Justice Department is not allowed to use funds to interfere with even interstate transfer of hemp material between Farm Bill compliant farmers. And so that is what allowed us, for instance, to get some genetics into multiple states from Vermont. If there is a roadmap for farmers, let's say from Oregon, to do that and to get those genetics into California under the regulatory system, I would say there is no need to make a legislative change. But if you get a report back from the AG that says actually our interpretation is that no, at this point, only already certified seeds are permitted to go in, then I would say legislative change is necessary. And again, I don't advocate a Wild West forever. It's the seeds have to be legitimately third-party tested to meet federal hemp definitions to begin with. That's a given. And then once they come in, I'm fine with, let's say, a 3-year window or grace period under which farmers can cultivate it, and they have to test appropriately. They can't test hot and all that good stuff. And if so, as in Colorado, a roadmap to making those domestic seeds certified.
Yeah. So Eric, you want me to chime in here with a comment on what the law says around that topic, just so that we're all on the same page? So what the law currently says is, except when grown by an established agricultural research institution or by a registered seed breeder developing a new California seed cultivar, industrial hemp shall only be grown if it is on the approved list of approved seed cultivars, and that includes certified seeds. So if it's being grown for commercial cultivation by a registered commercial grower, it needs to be on the list of certified seed. If it's being grown by a research institution or by a seed breeder, a registered seed breeder, then it does not need to come from that list, and that's what the legislation currently says. So I just wanted to make sure we're all aware of what's currently in there, so that way people know what they feel may need to be changed or not.
Thanks to the board. I just got a text from my family. I don't know if they saw my first "I love you," so I'm going to give it to them.
Excellent. Thank you, Doug. And purposely, I did want to have Doug speak before our next speaker. Alex is joining us from the California Crop Improvement Association. So Doug gave us a very high picture about what is going successful in other states in adapting cultivars to their new geographic climates. So there's been some internal discussions I hear from Alex about some sculpting and the formulating of this framework going forward. So
the keyboard, or?
Yeah, so you can go like
thank you, Alex.
or you can use that.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. We thank you for the invitation to come and make a presentation to the third meeting of the Industrial Hemp Advisory Board. My name is Alex Mkandawire. I'm from the California Crop Improvement Association. I'm going to talk briefly about who we are, hemp uses, hemp varieties, and hemp standards, and then make a final conclusion. We are the California Crop Improvement Association. This is an association that is recognized by the California Seed Law. as the official seed certifying agency for agronomic and vegetable seed in the state of California. Our objective is to ensure that California certified seed is of high quality. And by high quality, we are talking about trueness to variety, variety of purity. We're talking about freedom from noxious and problematic weeds, low inert matter, high germination, and low to zero tolerance for problematic seed-borne diseases. We talked a little bit about what we do, the process of seed certification in the first meeting, but would like to update you on the stuff that we've been doing over the past couple months. So everything that we do, we would like to make sure that we are aware of the definition of industrial hemp. And that particular definition was given in the Agricultural Act or the Farm Bill of 2014, which says the term industrial hemp will include the plant cannabis sativa and any part or derivative of such plant, including seeds of such plant, whether growing or not, that is used extensively for industrial purposes, which is fiber and seed, with a tetrahydrocannabinol concentration of not more than 3% on a dry weight basis. So we are cognizant of that particular definition in everything that we do at the California Crop Improvement Association. With that particular bill of 2014, this is what has happened, and this particular map comes from the National Hemp Association. You can see most of the states have either commercialized or are in various stages of legislation of industrial hemp, except Idaho, Oklahoma, we have Ohio, Louisiana, and Mississippi. I'm sure they will be on the board in growing this particular crop in due course. And so we have quite a number of states that we can share information with. Hemp can be grown for fiber, and those are some examples of products that we can make out of the fiber. Hemp can be grown for grain, and so we need to tailor our varieties for various uses. Hemp, as a grain, we can process all kinds of whole foods. This was a company I visited in Kentucky that had a lot of various food products that they make out of the industrial hemp grain. But we can also have what is called CBD from hemp. And that was a field, you see me kneeling in a field of industrial hemp there that is producing CBD from the floral parts to make sure that we are making as much resin as possible. But these particular plants come from transplants that are propagated in the greenhouses. So we are feeling at California Crop Improvement Association that in future, if California wants to also go that way, because in other states, this is actually 80% of their activities in the industrial hemp pilot projects. We would be able to get into nurseries and make sure that the materials that are being propagated still do meet the definition of industrial hemp. Okay, so as you know, THC is psychoactive, and that's the product that is being obtained in the medicinal cannabis. But the CBD, or the cannabidiol, is made from the same precursor that makes THC. The only difference is the enzymes within the plant. These industrial hemp plants will convert the precursor to cannabidiol. Cannabidiol would have just as many effects, or even more, than THC as a medicinal product. So we can make CBD protein as well, CBD oil, all kinds of products from that. So at California Crop Improvement Association, we are looking at varieties, different varieties that can produce products through fiber, seed or grain, or CBD. And so we have what we refer to as a certification technical committee. That particular committee at the California Crop Improvement Association picks up applications for certification of varieties. So my message to Doug is, if you have varieties, Doug, let's get in touch, you make applications, and we'll consider those particular applications. This is now just for the California Certification Agency. What we look at with these applications is verification of distinctness of a variety and uniqueness, and to ensure that a variety is actually stable. And for industrial hemp, we are also going to be looking at THC testing over locations. And as that information is provided and substantiated in the applications, the California Crop Improvement Association is going to approve those particular varieties for production. Okay, so as a certification agency, we are in touch with other certification agencies within the country under the realm of AOSCA, which is the Association of Official Seed Certifying Agencies. Within the United States, we have 44 different agencies, and we're just one of them. We are the only one in California, and each state has one. In some cases, a state has 2 agencies, but we are able to share materials. So in a way, the varieties that are accepted in California would be accepted by all the other 44 agencies. Apart from that, we have 2 agencies in Australia. We have an agency in Argentina. We have an agency in Brazil. We have 2 agencies in Canada. We have Chile, we have New Zealand, and we have South Africa. The varieties that are accepted in all these agencies and all these countries qualify to be certified in California as well through AOSCA. And so in the first meeting, we looked at some of the varieties that we were proposing to be approved. Those came initially through Canada, but they may not have been adaptable varieties for us. So we have something that is more interesting for now. So we'll get to that in a minute. We are also part of OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. This particular organization is based in Europe, in France, and it's kind of governmental, and it has a lot of different countries that participate. It's an organization that was put together by the United States to rehabilitate Europe after the Second World War, and then the US actually, from initiating the organization, also became a member. And so we have even more countries that participate. And each one of those particular countries would approve a variety. They send it to OECD. It becomes, or it gets onto the OECD variety list. As long as OECD accepts a variety, would be able to accept it as well, because we are part of OECD. And that would facilitate the exchange of materials, the exchange of germplasm with all these particular countries. So if you have a variety that is on the OECD list from any one of those particular countries you see on that particular list, we will also be able to accept that and have it approved. The only problem with OECD at the moment is that the varieties that are on the OECD list are not necessarily industrial hemp varieties. They would have THC contents of more than 0.3%. And so what we require is some form of plot tests and then tests of THC on any material that is on the OECD list. to justify calling it industrial hemp, and then would have it accepted or approved after the testing. All right. So with these three methods or three areas of approval of certification of varieties, we had this initial list, which I apologize, the letters are too small, you can't quite see, but we shared this during the first meeting. But more interestingly, we have a new list being added to that. This new list comes from our sister certification agency in Colorado, and it has newer and interesting materials from a number of seed companies, Schiavi Seeds, and I saw people from Schiavi Seeds. So we have varieties that were approved in Colorado in 2016, and these are Elita Campana, Fibranova, and Helena, coming from Schiavi Seeds. And then recently, in 2017, we had Bialobrensky from Bija, or Biha. We had Benico, Tigra, and Elite. Elite is an American, is a US variety. And so we would accept that via Colorado, whereas all the others were developed through OECD. They are on the OECD list. And the tests that were done in Colorado justified that these particular materials have 0.3% THC or less. And so we are putting all these varieties together and submitting them to the CCIA, California Crop Improvement Association Board of Directors, that are going to be meeting next month, the third week of February. They will approve all these particular varieties for production here in California. I guess you're aware of the statement of principles that came from USDA, the DEA, and the Food and Drug Administration during 2016 as a way of trying to put the Farm Bill into practice. There were a few questions. And so these three organizations or departments came up with the statement of principles. And in that, they allowed private citizens to be involved in pilot research programs. But at the same time, they allowed a limited movement of seeds or industrial hemp across state lines between pilot research programs. And so we are hoping that seeds of these varieties that we have talked about, they should be available in Kentucky. And I've contacted our colleagues in Kentucky. They have seed that has been produced, certified seed of the varieties that we talked about. But we should be also able to get seed of the same varieties from Colorado. And so under the statement of principles, the feds should be able to allow limited movement of seed that can be brought to California for production. The second thing that I wanted to share with you, okay, the first thing, actually, those varieties, I have a list of those, and I'll give the list to Kathy. She can make copies for those that are interested in looking at the entire list of varieties that the CCIA board is going to be approving next month. But at the same time, that particular board at the California Crop Improvement Association approves the varieties, but it also approves the standards under which those particular varieties can be grown. And so we have the industrial hemp standards for California. These are for seeds. And I have a copy here. It's a draft. Again, I will give this to Kathy. She can make copies for those that are interested. Our standards are industry-based. So would like the industry to be involved in setting up our standards to make sure that we get to have a robust industry. So I don't really necessarily have to go through every slide here in detail, but like I said, I have a copy of the standards here and would like for you to give us some input on whatever is in the standard. I'm going to leave my business cards on the desk over there, and you can shoot me an email about your feeling about the standards as well. But we look at the standards, the field eligibility, the land requirements. For higher class seed, foundation and registered seed will require that the field should not have been under industrial hemp the previous 5 years. If it's certified seed, the field should not have been under industrial hemp the previous 3 years. The field should also not have been observed to have any broom rep, because industrial hemp is a host. So we would not want a field to have any broom rep incidents. Would like to do 2 inspections, but 3 inspections wherever it may be appropriate for higher class seed. We have isolation standards. Those would be in the table there. It's the font is too little, but everything is over here. If you would like to have the standard, you'll be able to see. We have seed standards. So we would like to have a sample taken of the seed, sent to the lab, and the test of the seed should at least meet the standards for seed that are in that particular table. Again, that table is in the standards that I'll share with you. So we still are going to require THC testing. Before the seed is planted, we want to have a test result of THC with the planting stock. And then when the seed is actually harvested, before we certify the seed, we'd like the seed to also be accompanied by a THC test of the crop that produced the seed. This is just to conform with the Controlled Substance Act of 1970, Schedule 1. There are other questions that we have which will be clarified in the following discussion on THC testing. Is the THC testing going to be mandatory, or is it going to be random? The part that is going to be sampled, we need to clarify how many inches at the top of the plant. Is it going to be 4 inches? Is it going to be 6 inches? In some states, it's 9 inches. The time to be sampled, when should the sample be taken? The type of chromatography, is it going to be liquid chromatography, or is it going to be gas chromatography? We would like to have some uniformity of the seed testing procedures. And then the threshold, is it going to be 0.3%? In some states, I know that we have some very good lawyers that have come up and said, okay, but in the definition, it only says 0.3%. We are going to put in 0.399. So we have to decide, and how do we retest? How do we decide to retest? Are we going to go back and pick up a sample from whatever was grown, or we're going to retest the sample that was already submitted, and those kinds of things? So I'm sure that is going to be clarified. So in conclusion, industrial hemp is potentially a very profitable crop for our growers here in California. We are going to require all seed growers to register with the CDFA and the ag commissioners, the county ag commissioners, and get a license for that if that's required. The CCIA board is going to meet in February to consider the variety list that I've shared with you, and also the standards for production of certified seed that is here, and I'm going to share it with you as well from duplication. And lastly, THC testing will continue to be required in order that we meet the Controlled Substance Act requirements until such a time that maybe the feds don't actually, or until such time the feds take out industrial hemp from the controlled substance list, which probably is going to happen sooner or later, because I know that's in the new law that is under discussion in Washington. Okay, thanks. That's all I had.
Yeah, so with those handouts that you have that you passed on to Kathy, if you could email those to Kathy, and then what we'll do is Kathy will email them to all the board members, and then anyone else that wants those or any other of the documents that we've talked about today, email us, either one of our staff talk to them directly or email us at our general industrial hemp inbox, and we'll forward those along to whoever's interested.
Okay. Yeah,
and then if you'd like to make sure Kathy has your contact information, if you'd like us to forward that as well, let us know and we can forward that on to you.
All right.
Cool, thank you, Alex.
Yeah. I'll take questions if there are any.
Is there anything we, the public, can do to help with that separation from the Controlled Substance Act?
I'm not sure, but I guess maybe contacting our senators, that would be good. I know it was put into the new law that is under discussion. So just for them to be aware and to make sure that they're able to pass the law.
Is it possible to get more varieties on that list before you make the vote in February?
If you could repeat the question, if you wouldn't mind, with the microphone so we can all hear you.
Is there a way to get more varieties on that list than what you've got already coming up in February? Obviously apply, but I mean, can we get that established faster, sooner than later? We have strains that are in Colorado and other ones that have been certified, and that have sold or held tight at 0.3 in Colorado and other states in Nevada that are not on that list that I'd love to get on that list.
That list is not absolute. Like Josh mentioned earlier, that list will continue to grow.
And what do you consider
depending on when we get applications?
Okay, and what do you consider as like a testing? Like, is that is limited to how many acres? Can we test with 150 acres? Can we test with 200 acres? Can I test with a greenhouse?
Well, just write up the testing procedures and the results that you get.
Okay.
It could be materials that were produced in different locations. That's what we would actually prefer.
Okay.
And then, that's evidence that we can use to justify approval.
Because we have at least 4 or 5 different strains that we could offer as a variety to be able to do this, work with this. And if we can do it in greenhouse and make it go faster for you, I could do it in greenhouse and make the testing process go a lot quicker for you.
No, well, I think greenhouse or field, that's all good.
Either or?
So, yeah, either or. So just send us that information.
Okay.
And we'll be able to include the varieties on the list.
Okay.
The board is going to meet end of February, and so the list we have now is, it has been prepared for the board to approve. So if you do it quickly, we'll be able to.
I'll be waiting right here.
Yeah, if you do it quickly, we'll be able to add the information on. Like I said, we have a certification technical committee that would have to meet and look at that before they send their recommendations to the board.
Is that a closed meeting or open meeting, or what is that?
Yeah, that's a closed meeting of staff, so, yeah.
question. I noticed that you had both monoecious and dioecious varieties on there. For your testing on the seeds, are you going to test that plant as a seed-producing plant, both male-female plant, or are you also going to test just the female? So in other words, if you have a certified seed, and those that wish to do tissue culture or cloning in the traditional sense and grow just a female plant, are you testing and certifying for both growing types? Because there is a difference on how the plant produces its THC.
That's correct, but I suppose that's one of the things we'll be talking about in the segment on testing.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alex. Thank you for taking the time and coming down here and explaining to us. Yeah, so the meeting, Crop Technical Committee meeting is meeting in 5 weeks from now. So if to answer the question, if there are varieties out there, I would treat it no differently than a job application. Get as many points of evidence together from it, everything that you can do to officially submit that, because that would greatly behoove all of California farmers wanting to participate. Right now, there's verbal commitments of over 100,000 acres to produce in California, and there's not that global seed supply right now. So that's just, so we have big interest matched with an increasing global demand to grow hemp, and the Europeans and the Australians are being a little more tight with releasing a lot of seed to American farmers. And so we need to build up domestic seed stock. And so if for anyone in the audience, for anyone on the board, anyone who has varieties, Alex is truly the guy to go to. He is a champion for this industry. He's a good friend, and he wants to see this become a success. So any documents that you guys can provide to the CCIA would greatly behoove all of our actions here that we do together. I think we'll just keep on moving forward. I know, guys, we're doing really good. This has been a big meeting with a lot of discussions. We do have to be time sensitive for Rick, and the next topic meeting is very important to that. It's actually going to talk about the registration form itself. So, Josh?
Sure, so if I can get the staff to, actually, if you want to bring it up and then bring me the mouse, and I'll go ahead and see if I can control it from here. The grower one. Yep, perfect. And then go ahead and bring it on over, and I'll see if I can handle it from here from a distance. Oh, do you want to take a brief break? Okay. Let's go over this real quick, and we'll take a quick break. So we'll make it fast because it's pretty simple. So we were asked by the board, and we had already started the thought of is that as we mentioned earlier, the commissioners are going to be required to be registering growers, and so the registration is done with the commissioner, and the law has specific application requirements. It says A, B, C, and D have to be on the application, and we were asked to come up with kind of a rough template that the commissioners could then adjust and put it on their own letterhead, and then ideally be able to incorporate anything else that's specifically required through a local county ordinance or county procedures to be included on an application. For instance, they may have certain boilerplate language that has to be on every application coming into the county, things of that nature. So what we did, and it's pretty simple, I have it up here in front of you. We created 2 separate sample forms, and we're looking for comments and thoughts and anything that we might be able to adjust here, or how we can try to improve this. But they're pretty simple. I know we've had suggestions to look at the applications in other states. Those other states have 4, 5, 10-page applications with lots of information. We're only asked for a few specific things, and so we laid those out here. And literally, if you look at Food and Agricultural Code, section 81,003, subsection A, it says this information needs to be included on the application, A, B, C, D, so that's what we did. So we've got part 1, as in subsection 1, subsection A right below it, grower information. It needs the applicant name, mailing address, contact information, again, pretty basic. We added a couple of things that we feel that we're probably okay to do without making a regulation change. We added an email address that was not in the law, a phone number, and a registration number for the county to be able to keep track of them. Other than that, we did not really add anything other than just to try to make sure that we can contact growers. So if there's anything else that needs to be added, we would need to work with the board and work with the counties and make sure that we don't need to do any additional regulations or what have you. Subsection B requires growing site information, and so specifically the law says what is the physical address of the property where the planting is being grown, is the site being used for cultivation, storage, or both, and then it has to have a legal description of the site, which we feel is probably best handled through an attachment, and so that's why we included it as such. So again, very basic information. This is what's in the law, and so we put it on a relatively simple form that can be transferred over to the county fairly easily. We also want to make sure that all growing sites are listed so that way the county is aware of them. Subsection C, it requires that the grower inform the commissioner of what, that on the application of what approved seed varieties are being grown. And so we've got a section for what approved seed varieties are being grown. I've got 2 lines, perhaps it should only be 1 because it says variety instead of varieties, but either way, we're trying to keep it simple and keep this information relatively straightforward so it can be provided to the commissioner. And again, using the law as it stands. Part 2 of that in the law, it says that it has to be sent along with a fee. So we just included the $1,000 that was approved at the previous meeting. Obviously, this would be adjusted based off of whatever the fee structure is in that county. The county name and address and where that has to be sent to would vary, and then a signature. Again, keeping it very simple because this is all that the law requires. And if we get too far down the road of trying to add in additional application requirements, we could end up in a situation where we then have to do application regulations to specify what goes into that. So if that's necessary, that's certainly something that we would be willing to explore with the board. But at this point, we wanted to lay out what the basic requirements are for that. We did a separate sample for a seed breeder because it is a separate section of the Food and Agricultural Code. And it's a little bit smaller, I apologize, because there's more information and we tried to get it on one page. But it has the same requirements for what is being grown, except in subsection D where it says if the seed breeder is developing a new California seed cultivar to be certified by a seed certifying agency, this information is required. And so we included an additional box for that. That's by law only required if the grower is developing a new cultivar that's going to be certified by a certifying agency, which would be Alex, which the seed development plan would be far more detailed for your application with Alex and working with him and his staff. So that would be information that would be required to be provided to the commissioner in order to register as a seed breeder. Again, application fee, where to send the money to, and signing off on the bottom. Pretty simple, again, because this is all that is listed in the law. And we don't really have, again, we could create regulations to expand this, ask for more information, get more specific on any of these items if we get down the road and find that that's necessary because there's a huge discrepancy between what's being asked for in Tehama versus Kings. I've got them here, so I'm going to pick on them. Then that's something that we would want to address through regulation. But in the meantime, we will try, our thoughts is to try and keep this as simple as possible and keep it strictly in line with what's authorized in the law. So I did want to open it up to the board to say, first off, what are your thoughts and what would you like to see us change as far as what we have here? And then is there anything that the board would like to see regarding additions to a template or to requirements, or if there's any additional requirements that you'd like to discuss that we might want to explore that we would potentially need to work through with regulation? Yeah, Richard.
I was wondering where it says purpose and grain and fiber. Does grain then, would that mean food crop and fiber non-food crop? Just for clarification.
Sure. To be honest, we put what's in the law, and the law says indicate whether the approved seed cultivar to be grown and whether that cultivar will be grown for its grain or fiber or as a dual purpose crop. That's what the law gives us, and so that's what we included. Now, again, if there needs to be additional categories, that's something we could explore, and then we'll have to explore whether or not we would need to seek regulation to implement those. But yeah, I mean, that's certainly an open-ended question. We don't have definitions of what those things are, so we just kind of have to go with common sense definitions unless the board would like us to define them further.
No, I think that's fine, but if you're using pesticides, on the label, it specifies, is it a food crop or non-food crop? So
So that's a question for the industry, but my assumption would be that if you're saying you're growing it for grain, that would be a consumable product, whether by people or by animals. And I would open that to the members of the industry on the board to indicate what that actually means. But and it does not say cannabinoid production, so I don't know how that fits into that scheme either. Again, we included what's in the laws because we want to make sure we're covering the basis of what's in the law, but if it's something that we need to discuss further, either at this meeting or at a future meeting, that's something we can entertain.
Yeah, John Rulak. Joshua, is the intent also to have this form, will these be tabulated at the year end and say, this is how many acres or applicants for grain, how many for fiber?
Yeah, so all of the information on the application, the commissioners would be required to send copies of the application to the state. And so, yeah, we would create a database that would include all the information that's included on there. Again, that's why we would want to make sure there's at least some level of consistency, so that way we can actually tabulate the information and create some data on what's being grown and what it's being done for. But yeah, the applications would be submitted from the commissioner to CDFA, and we would create a database that would include that. What information would be made public and how would be something we'd have to discuss further, whether we would have a public registry that was available, what information would be included on there. You know, some of that would be limited due to private business information and what we're allowed to disclose and what we're not. So, I mean, those are things that we would have to kind of go down the road. But yes, it would all be collected by the department and would certainly be reported back to this board.
Follow-up question. I think it would be helpful to have an additional just question is if the grower's planning to produce this under certified organic, just to be able to, for the industry, as for instance, my company, Nativo, we source certified organic. And that might be, if you're tabulating, it would be interesting to say, well, 20% of the crop is certified organic or 10%. But one question is that going to require some new, does that put us into a more regulation? Like, do we have to get a change or request anything, or is that a simple fix?
That's a good question. I don't necessarily know the answer, but what I will say is that, and Rick can correct me if I'm wrong, but organic certification would also have their own reporting and their own data collection. And so we should be able, at the very least, to lean on that program to be able to report back information on organic production of hemp and be able to, compare the two databases and see how it matches up. So you get percentages and things like that. But yeah, I mean, as far as including it on this application that's submitted to the commissioner, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I don't see a problem with putting a checkbox saying, are you also participating in this other program or this other program? I don't know how far we want to go down that road of requiring those things, but it's something we can discuss, and we'd have to explore internally to determine what that would trigger as far as, a public process to incorporate it.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to add, if it's going to cause, more regulatory issues, I wouldn't want to pursue that, but if it's not a big deal, I think it would be helpful for the industry to know that.
Yeah, I think
collecting that information, that someone can just check a box, yeah, we're planning to pursue, to grow this under certified organic regulations.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, then certainly we can include additional survey information or things like that as we move down the road. Yeah, I mean, we'll communicate with our organic program as well on that and kind of figure out a path forward on that as well to kind of coordinate with them on interest and participation. Yeah, Lawrence.
All right, Lawrence Serpin. The form looks great. I like it. Two comments. One, I don't see anything on there showing that it's for 2 years versus 1 year.
Oh, okay.
And the other thing is, what if people are growing it for CBD, for flower? That's not a purpose listed.
Correct. So, yeah, biannual, and we included it at the bottom with the payment information, but we didn't include it anywhere else, so I think that's a good suggestion. We would incorporate that into the top, into the header, so that way people knew what they were submitting and how long it was good for. As far as CBD production, again, we included what was in the law. So if the board would like to suggest incorporating additional categories on the application, we would have to explore whether or not we have authority to do that. If so, if that would require regulation, I don't know. Again, the law, as we've discussed previously, doesn't really address CBD production or cannabinoid production, and so that is an overall concern of ours. And that may be something that could be fixed legislatively, that may be something we can address through regulation, or it may be something we can simply change on an application and move on. But we'd have to explore that. Allison?
Could there be a other box?
That's a good question. And that's a good suggestion. That's something we would have to explore it internally. Good idea.
John, I like your question a lot. I know with the USDA ruling, because it does have to be technically like a Farm Bill compliant program for there to be the organic certification. So, but I really do see and admire where you're coming from on that and having and including that. I'm just not sure if how to do it the most simplistic way, because yes, organic procuring is very important. I would like to know a public database of all the people that are already certified organic. I don't know if that might be just in the CCOF's hands or some other certifying agency.
Let me add two things to that. So we've already had some conversations with our state organic program about what the requirements are and how it would move forward, and the issues with regards to California law and how it all fits together. However, to John's point about at least surveying growers to find out if they're interested in participation, even if they can't actually participate yet, that is something that we could explore, and we could work with the commissioners either to include it on the application or maybe to simply include a survey with applications that the commissioners provide saying, are you interested in X, Y, and Z? That's something the board might want to discuss later on down the road as we get closer to being able to send these things out. I don't think there's we would get into any Administrative Procedures Act issues by including an optional survey to growers on interest in other programs. So that's something that we could explore as the board.
Yeah, my sense wasn't so much a survey, are you interested, but are you a certified organic grower? Just like yes or no.
Okay, yeah, and so again, we are working with the organic program on that to determine eligibility of California growers and how that would all work. So that is something we're working on. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and to Larry's point, I like this template a lot. It's one page. It's very simple. I don't see the need to fill out 10 pages and initial here, initial there, and do all this other stuff like some of the other states are doing here. So if there's any other comments, feedback from the board, open it up to any public comments as well.
We have one back there, and then we've got Wayne also.
Hi, I certainly didn't mean to suggest that Kentucky had all their ducks in a row. Just about ideas for fees. My question is, will you be maintaining a database, given the need for isolation distances for seed production? And if, when we get to the point where we're creating new varieties that are, for this part of California or that part of California, it'd be helpful to have a visual, I think it'd be helpful for law enforcement as well, to have a visual display of who's where so that we can ensure we're not accidentally changing the genetics.
Yeah, so we haven't gone down the road of that per se at this point. The application requirements in the law do include location information, including GPS coordinates, so that is something that we'll be collecting. We do have the ability to map that here in our division, and it's a fairly simple process. CCA also keeps track of every certified production field, and they do maintain maps of every certified production field to ensure that the certification requirements are met regarding distance requirements and things of that nature. We had not discussed any particular uses for that data at this point, but that's certainly something we could explore, especially if we start seeing down the road that there needs to be, or there are proposed requirements regarding isolation distances and things like that. But with regards to certification, that will be done through their process, and that's outside of the purview of this program. So, thank you.
Hi, Wayne Richmond, California Hemp Association. My understanding, this is simply a one-page application?
That's the goal.
My hat's off to you, literally. I was happy enough with the two-page Nevada application. I've looked over all 8 different states, and I liked the shortest one that was Section 7606 compliant, and you guys just blew my mind away with doing a one-pager. Now, the question is, when can we have it?
That's a good question.
I have 2 ag commissioners who wanted to know that.
Yeah, so we'll be coordinating with the commissioners and distributing this information.
Any
So
idea?
around the one-page item, so I did note a couple times that there is a potential for needing to attach additional information if you need to include legal descriptions of the site, things of that nature. But yeah, trying to keep things simple. As far as providing this to the commissioners, I mean, we can provide a template to them today. It's a matter of getting a regulation into law with a fee structure that they can then implement at a local level. Because until that's available, they can't register someone.
Okay, so I'm a little confused. We have fees at the state level. We're leaving the fees at the county level to the county ag commissioner. So why is that
We have not
statement operational?
set fees at the state level yet. We need to propose regulations and go through the Administrative Procedures Act process. So the board has proposed regulations, and the department will be developing a rulemaking package around those in order to put it out for a public process to propose fees. Once that fee structure is in regulation, then the local county boards of supervisors will then be able to take those regulations and enact a fee structure locally. But it still does have to go through.
Then what were the fees that were voted on that is the $1,000 for 2 years?
That's a proposal for regulation, and we still have to go through the Administrative Procedures Act process, the rulemaking process, to enact that and put it into regulation.
So are you saying that if an ag commissioner had this today and had the inclination and had somebody who was willing to pay the fees, that they can't accept it?
Yes.
Okay, when is that going to change?
As soon as the regulations are proposed and we have them, we go through that public rulemaking process, go through the public comment period, have responses to public comments, and are able to have those, that regulation accepted by the Office of Administrative Law. There's a rulemaking process. We did go through it at the last meeting and ran through what the specific requirements of that are. So as I mentioned earlier, we're in the process of developing those rulemaking documents. We are trying to get them out as quickly as possible, and then hopefully we'll have something proposed soon for the public to be able to comment on. We don't need any further action from the board on that, as they've already made their motion to recommend that we move forward with that process.
Okay, I think this is a little confusing for those of us who have also been here from the very beginning.
Sure.
I'd just like to put that out there. It was my understanding that we had fees in place. Today was merely codifying them by simply approving the last minute's meetings, which contained those fees. And now you're saying that that process has kind of been extended, is what I'm getting.
No, so at the last meeting, we had a discussion on what the rulemaking process is and outlined that the Administrative Procedures Act requires that if CDFA proposes regulations, that there is a specific process that we are required to go through. So the board made a motion, and we've already begun action on that by developing the documentation. The board made a motion that we begin that process. So we've already begun that process by beginning to develop documentation. We're not ready yet to post that for public comment, but that's the rulemaking process. So quickly, the rulemaking process includes development of not just the proposed text, but also supporting documents. Gets posted for public comment for a minimum of 45 days. After that, there is response. The department has to review and respond to every public comment that we receive. If there are further changes, there would be additional public comment periods. If there are no further changes, we would put together a final rulemaking package and submit it to the Office of Administrative Law. They then have 30 business days to review that package and approve or deny for posting. And so that's the process that we, by law, are required to go through to enact regulations.
Okay. How does that relate to the exempted research institutions?
It doesn't.
Okay, so they're exempted from that as well?
They're exempt from registration. So what we're discussing was a registration fee.
Okay, good. So I would like to recommend that you create a motion to create a subcommittee to create a strategic timeline to accomplish regulatory writings. And frankly, I would like to see this group meet as often as possible until this gets done. And I know I'm speaking for the entire room and lots of people who are watching today. You know, we're a year past the law, and we're still debating things like this. It's a little disconcerting for a lot of us, okay? And
I'd like to
blame
respond to
thing.
that. You know, as someone who's walked the halls here in Sacramento, and this gentleman here, Charles Farmer, was part of that. How many years ago did we start doing that?
2002.
Yeah, so some of us have been at this a long time, and unfortunately, the bill that was signed into law, that all of us had opportunity to change or adjust potentially, it is what it is. We're an advisory board here. And what is very clear, and we've repeated multiple times, is that it's going to require new legislation to adjust the current law. Until that happens, there's uncertainty. I understand the frustration. If I was a farmer listening to this and all the different gyrations, I'd be going, what is going on? This is an example of it's uncertainty, all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, this was what was signed by the governor and proposed by the legislation and signed. And until that gets changed, so I would encourage people the people in the industry to focus on that, to change the rule and get new legislation. That's going to require probably hiring a lobbyist and getting clarity on that. And until that time, we could be here 2 years from now having the same issues. So that's my 25-cent piece of advice.
Thank you, John. Also note to the public, the emergency regulations push failed this past November. We do not, as a board, have emergency regulations to go ahead and make something quickly happen. It failed because there was not enough legislative push. It failed because there was not enough money from the private industry. It failed because 2 senators across the street in the Capitol didn't really like each other that day, and so they shot down a bill. That is what happens in this town. That's what happens across the street. It is not this board. It is a direct push by the lobbying effort and the public dollars. Right now, there has been $0 put forward this year to change any legislation. Just know that.
What would that amount be?
About $100,000 is what I've been quoted to even get it passed by December 31st this year, to go and walk through all the halls. That's for it to be even passed, to be activated by January 1, 2019, ready for spring planting of 19. Okay. So it's just what it is.
I can appreciate the comments. I would suggest that we find ways to short circuit that nonsense. Those folks across the street work for us. We don't work for them. We're the taxpayers, okay? And we expect, and I know you're on the side of this argument, okay, but I'm making this a public statement from the California Hemp Association. We're tired of waiting. We're tired of legislators taking their sweet time. We know what the game is. I played this game. I used to be the Apple rep in charge of LA Unified School District, so I've played this political game up and down the state. I guarantee you, I don't want to play games anymore. I'm 64 years old. I'm not playing games. And so I suggest that this whole idea that we need to come up with $100,000 or God knows what unsightly amount of money to supposedly have conversations with people, I say you get out your cell phones, you start writing letters, we all show up at their desks, and that'll be what moves this ball.
That's what the trade
Cash
associations
and lobbyists is a game that I'm not going to play, personally.
Well, that's
So,
what trade associations
everybody
are
else
for,
can
mind
choose to do that, but our group will not do that. Just wanted to make that clear.
So there does need to be a legislative push. Obviously, that does need to come funded from the private sector. It won't come from Josh's wallet, I will tell you that. And so with just going onward now, everything's going to happen in the halls of your county board of supervisors, ultimately.
Pretty much.
And we look to people like Rick and say, Rick, what more support can we provide you, so when you're having these meetings with your county board of supervisors, and to speed along some of this process, but to do it in a prudent and fiscal way where we don't trip out of the gate. That's why this board is created, just to provide the advice.
So we're going to ask that we bring this back around to the application and the application process if we can, and comments on that, and we'll open it up for additional comments later on.
I just put these out here just so you should all know. These are legal hemp products bought by me in this country. This is 3D hemp filament for 3D printers. And this is lovely Nutiva products that I use and buy regularly. And we can buy this stuff, and that's the crime. I can buy this stuff here, but our farmers cannot grow it legally. I'm standing here telling you guys we need to do whatever we can to figure out how to move past this paperwork morass. Okay? And I'm just making.
That's fine. Thank you, Wayne.
I'm supposed to have that voice, and so I'm exercising it. But it's crazy. This is the crime, that we can't grow this stuff and produce this stuff in state for companies like Nutiva.
All right. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Justin Eve. I'm a USDA certified organic farmer here locally. Our company is 7 generations producers. We're focused on introduction of farming practices and new cash crops for the changing future. A couple comments, maybe some clarity. As far as your application, there's no point in convoluting the application with questions for organic farmers. We have to deal with enough as it is. Just check box yes or no. Yes, we're organic farmers, and let them hash it out, as has been done for the last 150 years in California. Well, 1980s is when application for organics really came on. So that's my comment on the application process. Also on the application process, CCIA you guys brought up, I'm not sure if they're actually the regulatory body that we have to get a certified seed through. And if that is, do we put that on the application that we have certified seed and then list that? Just trying to get some clarity on what is certified seed and who do we actually clarify what our seed or where our seed is coming from if it's been certified. And if we want to have a certified seed that's not on the list, then do we apply for that and go through the process with the CCIA? And is that approved by your board or is that a state?
Yeah.
You know,
So really quickly, so the law requires the use of approved seed varieties, which are varieties that are certified by member organizations. So the seed does not have to be produced under the oversight of CCIA and it's certified by CCIA. It has to be produced and under the oversight of a member organization in order to be planted for a commercial grower in California. CCIA is one of those member organizations, and the CCIA is specifically listed as a certifier for such seed. Being able to certify seed in California, if you want to produce certified seed, CCIA is the certifying agency in California. So if you're looking at producing certified seed in California, that goes through CCIA, through their processes and procedures, and that's what Alex was talking about.
is that open for another agency to come in and become a certifying agency, or is that a monopolistic mentality we're taking on the certification process?
So that's through law and through regulation. They've been for many years the recognized certifying agency. California CCIA is a nonprofit organization that is a collaborative effort between the UC system, CDFA, growers, et cetera. They have an oversight board, and Alex, I'm sure, can provide more information on who they are. I'm not familiar with the process of becoming a seed certifying agency. I don't know the last time that happened, but that's something, if you have questions and you want us to try to explore, we can.
But as far as the board's advice, they are saying that CCIA is that certifying agency we have to go through.
That's the department recognized seed certifying agency is CCIA. And they are the member organization. John can
in the California seed law, CCIA is designated as the official seed certifying agency of the state of California.
Understandable, thank you. Another comment to the application process about CBD. From my understanding, things aren't illegal until they're made illegal. So from my understanding, you're basically saying it's legal until someone makes it illegal in the state based on your application process?
So the application doesn't specify cannabinoid production, but yeah, cannabinoid production is not addressed in the law at all. So other than THC. So that's the answer to your question. Yeah, it's not addressed. So the suggestion to include other, I think, is a valid one. We've got a comment in the back.
If I may.
Sure.
All of it you're looking at on that section, I think also.
Got one more comment.
The application shall include, it doesn't mean it may not include any number of others. You could ask for all kinds of other things in addition. It doesn't restrict you. The biggest difference is when the Leno bill in 2013 was passed, it mirrored the definition of industrial hemp on the federal level. It only talked about seed cake and fiber. The people of the state of California voted in November of 2016 to change the law. In that law, they changed the definition of industrial hemp radically. And so instead of only being able to use seed cake and fiber and not the flower top at all, or the resin derived from any portion of the hemp, that was always the definition at the federal level, mirrored by state law, by our CSA as well as the federal level. Process before changed it. Instead, the flower top can be used and resin from any portion of the plant can be used. It's a radical change. And so we now have in there the ability to use every part of the plant. The resin is obviously talking about extraction. And
Correct. Correct. Thank you for your comment. So 2 items there. So you're correct. The definition of industrial hemp was changed and does include a very broad definition that would incorporate CBD production. What we're discussing is what the law says about cultivation and what you cultivate for. And those don't address in the code sections that we have to enforce CBD production. And again, I'm not disagreeing with you that we can't add additional categories or make the law more specific around those. My suggestion is whether or not that would trigger things like the Administrative Procedures Act that we were just discussing, and whether or not we would have to go down that road as well. We don't know. So if the board would like us to make changes to the application or to make changes to how the law is applied around those crops, that's something that the board can discuss. Again, I'm not suggesting that that the definition of industrial hemp doesn't include that. I'm suggesting that the law itself that we have around cultivation doesn't address that type of cultivation. I get, yeah. Yes. Right, so, okay. Okay.
And one last comment, or to provide some clarity maybe on your application or the process in which you're going through. You guys disclosed last time you received something around $36,000 for staffing through the year, and Cal Cannabis received something like $3 million. I'm not sure if you guys ever got clarity on why basically the same law, majority of that was given to them and not to us, because it seems like the frustrating part is that you're not able to do the work that you need to get done to get through this process to officially propose that to the public and then add commissioners so we can actually apply for that. And so my comment, or to provide clarity, is one, okay, if we as growers form a PAC to raise capital to lobby, that's great and all. And, you know, there's a comment of $100,000 needs to be raised. My biggest question is, can we provide, if we form a PAC, funds back so you can get through this application process? And if that's not the case, and it's just purely through lobbying efforts, there was a gentleman here last time named G.V. Ayers, and he says he's the only hemp lobbyist, official hemp lobbyist in California. And from my understanding, they did try to do an emergency ordinance to get this passed through so we can get some of this stuff done. Is the emergency ordinance available so we can get through the application process, or B, can we provide funding back to the board or the CDFA so they can have funding, so they can work on it more? Or C, as he suggested, can we provide or create a subcommittee so we can work on this without having to derive the funds from the California Department of Food and Ag?
So we're running over on time, but I do want to, I'll just address a couple things that were mentioned at the last meeting. So there was a suggestion to use the funds from Prop 64 for this program. Our staff did look into it, and Prop 64 is very specific about what laws can and cannot be used for that loan. Although it was expressed at the last meeting, it would still be a loan either way. So that part didn't really change the actions of the program. It's more of seeking funds, increasing the amount of that loan, and then eventually passing those costs back on to the growers. And it was also mentioned at the last meeting, CDFA cannot accept funds that are not appropriated by the legislature. So the legislature tells us what money we can and cannot collect, what money we are given from the legislature. That's the only place that we can get it, is from the legislature signed by the governor. We can't accept private donations or private funds or anything of that nature for the purposes of the program. Yep.
Hi again, Chris Boucher with FarmTiva. As you know, I've been around here quite a while. Drafted the first California industrial hemp bill in 1995. I've been through John, Larry over the years. I don't know how many bills were vetoed. Anyways, to stay focused on the template here. That's why I have the mic. I noticed with the GPS coordinates, I've grown in Colorado, down in Pueblo and in Colorado on the application. You attach either Google Earth or I think Earth Point. And that way, whether it's the sheriff, who's ever looking at the application, it's just for the efficacy of it. I know it's another attachment and it's a very simple application, but I'd recommend putting that language within either Earth Point or Google Maps, and that way you have copy of the actual physical parameters of the field. Just makes it easier. And also, under the categories, I don't know if they could add in, as John mentioned, the organics, which would be really important, and maybe food, whether somebody's growing it for food, that might subcategorize within the cannabinoid section. And last but not least, I wanted to mention what Wayne had said about getting CDFA to timeline all these issues that we've talked about. Is now these changes, are they going to take 3 weeks, 3 months? So I think we really need to timeline some of these issues in writing, so at least all of us have some kind of visual, something up on the windshield in terms of our timelines to see whatever the bureaucracy is going to take to push this through. So I think that would be really important. If we can get the board to motion a timeline issue, I think that would be satisfying to some people. So again, thank you.
I'm going to offer a suggestion here to Eric. If we can take one, it looks like we have another comment right there. Okay, and then if we can take a quick break. I know there's some people that need to use the restroom. We can take a 5-minute break and come back after the comment. Okay, perfect. Sure. If you want to head over there, Kathy.
Just a quick comment. Kevin Johnson, I have one suggestion for the template, to also have a box for other. That way it opens up for the future to do other things. As Alex had said, I believe he said in his presentation that 80% of hemp grown in the United States is being used for CBD. I think that it would be important to have another box there.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we'll take a quick break.
Yeah, motion to just take a, oh, I don't need a motion. Let's just do a 5-minute quick recess. We are going to go into the testing section next, and I do want and expect a lot of public comment from that, so we're just going to go get stretched out real quick and come back right to it. Thank you.
You know, Josh probably is too humble to say it, but, you know, I understand strong business, but he's working for other industries as well. Nursery, seed, cotton. So to write regulations, yeah, and to write regulations, can allocate, you know, this department, you know, we show resources, or even alteration, they're trying to write different issues. Okay, no problem. It's difficult to description is what I get on my title. Allocate time with the department to do that. What they were trying to do, you know, it's just better is can allocate. Okay. You have a suggestion? Oh, that's all. The thing is, it's super keen issues. It's not what farmers want. I'm sure he's welcome to, you know, any suggestions and help, but frameworks, that kind of thing, you know, I mean, people, like, it's just gonna, you know, almost takes a financial commitment, and that's what you guys are trying to address this meeting, you know. I just wanted to say that, so if that does come up later. So the issue right now is staff, so. One of the things that was and I would be glad to pick on your whatever. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. We'll volunteer. Okay.
Okay.
Let's get through this. So,
Yeah.
we'll do what we can. I think we may have to.
Do you want, I mean, do you want to?
It'll be well. It'll go over well. Perfect. All right. Yeah. No, it shouldn't be too much longer. But yeah, thanks.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if we could please find your seat. It is right now 12:51. We've got the last main topic matter of discussion. All right, everyone. I believe there was one more comment remaining from the last discussion point.
So we're going to get started. We had one more comment that was pending on the last item. If we can get to that. I can see the person who was looking to make the comment is still in conversation. Hey, Kathy, would you mind taking the microphone over to the gentleman that was waiting, and we can ask him to make his comment? Three more. Third person in line right there. Straight. Yep. One more right there.
I know, I know. All right, everyone.
We will get kicked out of here eventually, so if we can keep going.
I'm hungry. My wife misses me, so let's go ahead and wrap this up. Really good discussion point up next. Really think that was a good break just to get the brain oxygenated. This next conversation is going to be somewhat important, but let's go ahead and wrap up that last comment from the previous section.
If we can get a mic, we can't hear you back here, sorry. If you can come up to the, yeah.
And it's for the people listening.
It's coming up, yeah, because, yeah, I can't hear you.
Processing, and if we're making this for CBD, technically all of our CBD we make is for crude, which is food-based. Isolate, food-based goes in drinks. So it fills out the application the same way, it just leaves a massive loophole for us. And then processing. This is pointless unless we can make a processing lab.
Right. So processing is not addressed in the law. The law only addresses cultivation, so it doesn't say, again, the law is absent on what to do with processing. So
you're leaving this like in the Wild West of the cannabis industry unless you guys make a decision. Eric, I will pay you to be our lobbyist.
Yeah. No, that's something that's not addressed in law currently. All right.
That actually is a great conversation into this next one here, because
one more on the last agenda.
Sorry, Eric, going to make it quick. On your form, maybe there should be a checkoff box for research institutions so that the Department of Ag knows right off instead of walking onto a field saying, wait a minute, we didn't know about this.
So by law, we cannot require a research institution to notify us ahead of planting because they're exempt from the registration requirements. So ideally, that would not be the case, and we'd be able to
but the law also says it's legal to do, yet that doesn't stop law enforcement from destroying it. So there has to be some way for law enforcement to know that the law has changed.
So that was the purpose of one of the motions from the last meeting, was to at least provide a method where institutions could voluntarily notify the commissioner, notify the department that they're growing, and be able to provide that information. So, we'd like to move forward on that, but in the meantime, we'll wait for legislative change. Thank you.
So the last big section here, before we get into some public comments and set the next meeting topics and whatnot, is the testing stuff. Now, as Josh has reiterated multiple times, testing is only needed if you are going to be a commercial grower. If you are affiliated with a private ag research institution or an institution of higher education, then you don't need to worry about anything I'm going to say. However, for the majority of the people that will just be commercial growers, this is a great conversation that does need to get talked about. Right now, I'll just go back and say, I did get confirmation just 20 minutes ago. There was legislation submitted, new legislative wording submitted to the people across the street there. That's good. We'll see what progress comes from that. In that legislative wording cleans up a lot of the confusion, a lot of the heartache that the industry in California is feeling right now. But just to move forward in talking about right now, if you are a commercial grower and you have seed that just fell down from the sky, you do technically need to use a drug enforcement, a DEA registered lab to have that material tested. That is your responsibility, as already mentioned in the law. It is the grower who submits that. So the grower, I mean, I have not personally myself ever called up a lab with a DEA registration, said, can you test my hemp for me? Then they're gonna wanna know all this other information. What's hemp, right? They're gonna know, no, that's marijuana, we don't test that. That's against the Controlled Substance Act. So there's maybe 20, I don't know, DEA registered labs in the state of California already. I have verbal acknowledgement from one that would be willing to test hemp, one, and that's in San Francisco. And so if you're growing down in Imperial County as a commercial grower, it would just behoove a person to know where they're gonna send that material to before they cut off the top of the plant and put it in the mail, of which we'll have to talk about as well, because you can't really use USPS technically, but I don't know. That's where attorneys are really great to pay. No, I don't want to say that too often. So let's, this is really for like, and I really am looking forward to good public comments. And if you do want to like scroll down a couple questions, the board does want to hear those. For the conversations between the board, this is, John, I'll look to you as well because you have experience in other states. We got to do something about this. North Dakota increased their acreage fee from what was $5 a couple years ago. They wanted to increase it to $45. That was the state legislator of North Dakota saying that arbitrarily because we don't know how to test it. We don't know how to take it off the field. We don't know who goes to the field to test this crop or the lab to take it to. And the lab that the legislator decided that that material goes to was selected by the state legislator, but that lab was charging people almost $300 for a basic gas chromatography test, which should not cost more than $100. So there's a lot of issues regards around testing for those who pay attention to the marijuana stuff in Oregon or even the hemp stuff up in Oregon. You'll know it was the testing protocols that nearly crippled and bottlenecked that entire industry almost overnight. So we can't have the normal farmer who just wants to grow 100 acres in a row crop think, what do I do? It's almost, the birds are starting to land on my plants. I know that it's ready for harvest. Who's going to test my crop? Because I don't want the state sheriff coming up and saying, well, you can't do anything with it. You can't move it. So how do we promote free enterprise, but prudent and fiscally responsible? And so it was mentioned that Nevada, you know, I really like that guy in Nevada who runs the program there. I feel bad for him because he's literally driving all over the state of Nevada from Sparks, driving all over the place, just him, maybe in someone else, but he has to go and do a lot of that stuff. Now, does he want to do that? Well, that is his full-time job. Guys like Josh over here and other folks with the CDFA, this is unfortunately not a full-time job yet until another internal person with the CDFA is hired to facilitate some of this stuff. But we have to do things on a county ag commissioner level. And so who in the county then is that person to go to a certain person's field, take whatever portion of this 10-foot plant that would be deemed necessary for a THC testing, because that's all we really need to test for immediately is for THC. I would say if the contract is for food production, it would be the buyer's responsibility of that grain material to make sure that, you know, no pesticides or anything was put on it. But as far as from testing, I have seen $3,000 testing bills from other states. Wow. And that's just because not enough foresight was given to the implementation. It looks great on paper, but when you have a guy physically driving all across the state to go do something, in California, I'm guessing we're going to have over 500 registered. If this document was signed, sealed, ready to deliver, there would be over 500 people in California right now, ready and willing to grow some hemp here. So as far as our testing protocols, it's important. I wasn't living in California when the whole fruit fly fiasco thing happened, but I've heard about the devastation that it caused. And so, yes, there's germplasm coming in from Oregon, from Colorado, from Nevada, from all these other places. That how do we just make sure as an industry that we promote free enterprise, we promote innovation, and at the same time, we always take a look and responsibility of the farmer. What is that farmer's responsibility come that late day in August when it's time to test? What happens? Because we can't have our farmers spending and spending and spending. So, I don't know. I would also like to ask Rick. I'd like to ask David as well. Has internal conversations in your guys' counties and your guys' leadership departments, have they talked about this specific area yet?
Quick answer is no. We haven't. I mean, we have protocol in existing law that requires, it spells out, it shall be tested, upper 1/3 of the plant after the flower, and going through the law, through statute. But we're going to have to develop regulations on how to do that. And in the short amount of time we have today, it's not going to happen. But I would like to recommend that we have a meeting very soon just to deal with this portion and develop that regulatory package, because that's going to be the biggest issue for the Ag Commissioner. Are we going to be the entity doing that, or what agency is going to do that? And what are the requirements, random sampling, what type of pattern, how much per acre, how much you need for 100 acres. So we're going to need experts in those agencies and other agencies to make those recommendations. I'm certainly not the expert. There may be a few Ag Commissioners that can participate, but I'm not an expert in that. But there's going to be other agencies that can do that. CDFA will also have recommendations, but that's going to be the big crux. And I would highly suggest having a meeting dealing strictly with that as soon as possible.
Ag Commissioner from Kings County is here with me, and we briefly talked about it, and we'd like to stay out of it, frankly. I mean, it's the grower's responsibility. I think that should be the onus of the grower to take care of. Obviously the Ag Commissioner would want to be able to verify that the testing occurred, but I just think that let's not overburden the Ag Commissioner's office with another piece of that, because then that's just going to turn into another fee. So I think you leave it up with the growers.
Now, there is some conversation I want to just have with the board real quickly. For anyone that has grown hemp material before, if they send it to 3 different labs, I guarantee a shiny penny, you will get 3 different responses back. Now, the problem with cannabinoid existing labs, let's just call them labs that are already testing marijuana material, then it is down to the diligence of the person doing that chromatography test to clean the equipment adequately and properly to not run a hemp specimen through after a marijuana specimen. Why? Because I've been in these labs. I know these guys. They don't get paid that much, and they're just testing. And so what do? They have all this material backed up, and they need to push more material through so they don't clean their equipment. I have literally had a certified seed flower that is not, it's excluded from testing up in Canada, but because they ran it through a THC testing equipment, I had over 4% THC in my test result, and that is a certified seed from Canada. So do I, now this is just my humble opinion, do I want a marijuana lab testing my hemp material? No, not at all. There's not enough trust in this industry yet. Licensed marijuana labs just started opening business just a couple weeks ago. What is established, what is certified? Van, you're actually going to be the pro on this one. With the UC Ag and Agricultural Natural, your UC Extension office there, on your guys' website is a list of over almost 100 certified labs already, plant and soil labs, all across the state in all these counties. I've seen the list. I've seen it. They exist. And so we, maybe as an advisory, not really as an advisory board, this is really done through legislation and the pragmatism of the industry, but can we start to say that that material has to be maybe tested through those existing plant and soil labs, because those are established, those have reputation behind them that the DEA could even back up. Now, because we can do whatever we want, we can do a no, don't ask, don't tell policy, but it's all going to come down to what the county sheriff is going to do. It all comes honestly down to what that individual DEA agent is going to do that day on that field at that test. And so we have human error that I want to take away from this formula. And so I'm open to opinions, Van, if you've got any feedback there.
I'll be honest, I'm not very familiar if there are UC outlets that would do testing like this. I mean, my experience working with UC with cannabis is they're very conservative right now, so I'd be surprised if that was going to be an outlet that would do it. They may be able to recommend labs that they use, but yeah.
Because let's say I have 100 acres that's contracted for grain, and then I submit that grain for a testing sample, but that's done through a marijuana lab facility, and that testing sample comes back at 4 or 5% THC, then my buyers who are in the agricultural field, they're not going to accept my test form, because that by law says I have to supply my buying agents with all my test reports. So to go back to Rick's statement, I think it's very imperative that we set an entire dedicated meeting to understanding the formulations of how to successfully implement this. But then I go to Josh and then I say, how do we to make that meeting very, very effective in a timely manner? Do we need to get any type of previous messaging, or is this all going to be advisory board putting recommendations together to the department? Or can we include the public? How do we do this?
So there's a couple options that the board has. If the board wants to set a meeting just to discuss this topic, the board itself can set a meeting where it just discusses this topic, and then it's totally fine if the entire board wants to participate in that meeting, and then we would invite additional subject matter experts to present to the board on the topic. That's totally fine. It would be similar to this meeting where we have public comments and motions and things of that nature. The board could also choose to establish a small working group or a separate working group that would include members of the board plus specific subject matter experts to advise the board on, or advise the department on those issues. That separate working group could either advise the department directly or could advise the board to thus advise the department directly, so that way it's still mentioned at a board meeting. Again, there's a couple of options there on how the board wants to do. do their activity. If they simply want one person to go back and come up with a proposal and present it to the board later and to work on something to be able to present it back to be presented back to the group to have an opinion of the full board, we can do that. You can create a subcommittee, and the subcommittee of the group could, again, have a discussion, have public comment, bring a recommendation to the board for the board to approve. So, I mean, there's lots of options. It sounds like the one that was being recommended by Rick was really to include the whole board. Set up a board meeting specific to this topic and invite additional subject matter experts to advise the board and provide information to the board so the board can make a formal recommendation. And I think that's would be a reasonable way to move forward as long as the members of the board are interested in participating in that process. Looks like yes.
To be clear, I didn't, excuse me, to be clear, I didn't make a motion, but having heard the options that you just laid out, Josh, I think it would be, we'd get more accomplished if you formed a subgroup with the industry experts and they brought that to the full committee. I would recommend to go in that direction.
Okay. So we would need a recommendation, and again, the chair can appoint that committee at his discretion if he so chooses to request a member to lead that committee and what additional members would be on it. And we would generally do that here, although that can be done after the fact, and then bring that information, the full committee, and that information here. That committee meeting would be publicly noticed just as this one is, and we would still provide notice to everyone that we provide notices of the board meetings to. And still do minutes and all those things. The minutes would be approved by this board, just so y'all are aware of the procedures. Does that sound good to you, Eric?
So what do you guys want to do to proceed forward with that?
I would like to see the working group model. I would love to see the smart people in this room who have a lot of experience in the field participate and have a working group of 7 people, and at our next meeting, let's have a document that says, here's our recommendations, and we can look at it and say yes and no, and the people on the board who feel like they're qualified to be part of that working group can join. The people on the board who are not qualified or feel like it's outside of their expertise can back off.
So we would need either volunteers or an appointment from Eric on who on the board would participate in that meeting, and then we would probably be able to appoint somebody to put together that working group and move forward with it.
Any volunteers? Richard?
Dan?
And who else do we have?
Allison? Okay. Sounds good. So if Richard and Allison want to coordinate with us, we'll create a group. And so if the board can come to us with recommendations on additional subject matter experts to include, we'll set up a meeting with that task force and move forward with that to hold a meeting specifically around testing to come back to the board with a recommendation for a proposal, if necessary, around testing and sampling, yes.
And now for the proper protocols for including subject matter experts. Can we get some clarity there?
So, John, I mean, do we need to appoint those people here as part of this meeting, or can we do that?
The chair can.
The chair can appoint.
a subcommittee.
But does he have to do it here, or can he do that outside of this meeting?
It's beyond me, I'm not sure. The chair would just usually ask for volunteers and people would be appointed.
How about we do this? We
They
ask
can
for
all participate,
recommendations.
it's a public meeting, you know.
Yeah, so how about we do this? We ask for some recommendations from the board now and contact those people and try to get them to participate. And then we can adjust as we have willingness. If we have recommendations for participants from the board, from Eric, on people to contact. We can also include contacts in other states, since I think it seems like that's a good idea based off the comments from the public, is including people that are already doing this work.
I think we should contact a reputable testing laboratory. Maybe Steep Hill, maybe have Reggie come in and talk about what he would recommend us do about this problem.
Yeah, I like that idea too. If we invited someone from Steep Hill, I would also want to invite someone from like the North Dakota plant lab or Minnesota testing lab, just to get their opinion. And then also because of how polar opposite they are, the complexity of contacting someone from the Colorado organization as well as the Nevada organization to really give their 2 cents. Because why? I want to know 2 things. The guy who runs the Colorado Department of Agriculture experiences significant more headaches than in Nevada, just because of all the paperwork process that's needed and the amount of time and effort it's taken to facilitate that program, versus just in Nevada, a car and a lot of time, but less paperwork. And so I want to marry these two together here. So, boy, how do we do this? Okay. So, motion to create a...
Sure, so, we don't need a motion, no.
Okay.
No, the chair can create the board. So the chair is proposing to create a board led by Richard and Allison, or create a subcommittee with, led by Richard and Allison, consisting of subject matter experts to review the, review guidelines for sampling and testing for THC, and come back to the board with a recommendation at the next meeting, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
I think we're good on that, and yeah, we don't need a formal motion or a vote on that, unless there's an objection from anyone.
And to anyone in the public, to anyone listening to this broadcast, if there is any public feedback or opinion, just know that can be submitted. We do want to know this. This is open to as much feedback as we can, because this has to be done. It has to be done right. I will not let happen in California what happened in Colorado, and certainly not what happened in Oregon. The industry is too delicate for things not to be thought through 100% efficiently. And so I do believe Richard, Allison are going to be two great points. I do believe getting advisors from Steep Hill and other just agricultural plant and soil labs will be very beneficial. The board is, as mentioned, we are just advisors. We don't want the bullets. We don't want the arrows. We don't want this. This is democracy, and damn it, I love America. And so, we'll do this right. And we will do it in a steadfast manner. So I do make a motion to have this working group committed within a working document.
No motion.
No motion.
No motion, but you are assigning the working group.
Yes. Okay, so I assign, let's see, so Richard, Allison, and an additional...
Subject matter experts to be named later.
An additional 5 subject matter experts to be named later, for a total of 7.
To report back to the board at the next meeting on this topic. And it looks like we've got some interest in public comments. Again, if we can get the microphones going around and make sure everybody's identifying themselves and speaking into the mic, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, Wayne Richmond, California Hemp Association. Regarding the testing, one of the things I'd like to suggest is that I agree with Eric. Getting DEA involved is probably just sticky. I mean, we're talking about what we hope will be treated like a tomato or broccoli eventually. Okay? So I agree, keep their hands out of it. Now, another solution I would like to suggest is there are ISO certified labs in state which are widely recognized and have high international standards. And in particular, I'm using AGQ Labs in Ventura. They are top drawer laboratory with a great history. And they have informed me that they can contact suppliers and get THC samples to test against. And when I presented the idea of the cleaning of the equipment, he said, I'll just buy separate equipment and put it in another room. So we have easy solutions if we want them. That's all I wanted to say.
Hi, Brian Webster with CA Hemp and member of the California Hemp Association. There is here in California an Association of Commercial Cannabis Laboratories. So you don't have to go to just one business lab. You can go to an association of business labs, and they are responsible for setting standards and and collaborating, that kind of thing. They're at cacannabislabs.com, and I think there should be enough of a market in the California hemp industry to create separate lab equipment to put in a separate room, as Wayne said.
Thank you for the suggestion. So if you want to move on to the next item, and we'll have further discussion at the working group meeting, and then at the following board meeting. So real quick, Eric, so we had discussed, actually, well, we're doing okay on time, so I'm going to really quickly run through this. So again, this is a very quick discussion. It's on industrial hemp and the California seed law. I've got something up here that was put together by Carl Pfeiffer, who unfortunately wasn't able to be with us today. He is, or is currently and soon will be the board manager for this board. He's out of state with some family issues, but he was able to put this together because he's also our seed control official for the state of California. And so we wanted to present to the board really quickly on industrial hemp and the California seed law. So the Federal Seed Act regulations do list hemp, which is defined as, or listed with this species Cannabis sativa, subspecies sativa, in the definition of agricultural seed in the code section that you see there. And then there are germination tests also included in federal regulations for hemp. It doesn't say industrial hemp, it just simply says hemp and provides cannabis sativa. The Association of Official Seed Analysts also has rules and standards for the testing of hemp seeds. When we talk about these testing standards, we're talking about germination testing and purity testing, which Alex briefly touched on earlier, which would be tests that are required for any other seeds that are sold within the state. So if you're selling alfalfa seeds, there are germination testing standards that are required, and then you have to label the seed with those. So there are testing standards available, and the Association of Official Seed Certifying Agencies, AOSCA, which Alex was talking about earlier, as he mentioned, has seed certification standards. Currently, hemp is not listed as an agricultural seed in California. We have a regulation, California Code of Regulations, section 3899, that lists every agricultural seed in California. So it lists, again, alfalfa and wheat, et cetera, to define what is an agricultural seed, so that way we know what crops we actually are going to then require labeling in accordance with the labeling requirements for agricultural seed, which again are germination, germination, purity, weed seeds, et cetera. So if you're selling cotton seeds, you have to put a label on the seed that has specific information that's required for all agricultural seeds. The Seed Advisory Board, which we've got a board similar to this, it's the California Seed Advisory Board. They have discussed in the past adding hemp to the list of agricultural seeds, but the time they did not yet move to do so, basically, well, at the time was prior to Prop 64, I believe the last time they discussed it. So they didn't move forward with it because it wasn't for general sale in California. At this point, they have not revisited that, but again, I wanted people to know that this could potentially be a requirement that could come down the line if hemp, the intent of the industry is to consider hemp just another agronomic crop. There are labeling requirements and other requirements that are required for every single other crop, whether it's you're producing seed or cuttings or whatever. So we did want to make sure people are aware of that, and that will be a discussion that will be had again in the future, especially once we start to move towards seed production and commercial cultivation in California. In the meantime, after the last meeting, Carl actually did kind of an informal poll of every state seed control official and said, so what does your state do? Because every state has its own seed law that's, again, kind of coordinated with the Federal Seed Act. Every state has its own seed regulation program, seed labeling requirements. They have a seed lab that performs testing. So he said, what are you all doing with regards to hemp? Alex had that map up of all the states that are currently working with or in the process of working with hemp. So he didn't hear back from 16 of them, but from the other 34, only 6 of the labs, of the state seed labs, were actually doing germination or purity testing for hemp seed. The only one that was actually enforcing labeling requirements for purity and germination was Colorado. All the other 5 states that were doing testing, they were doing it for research samples, and they were doing it for service samples for growers that were requesting it of their lab. They were not doing regulatory samples. So I believe I mentioned in the past, but just so you're all aware, for seed that's sold in California, our program has staff that go out and they collect samples from various seed companies, and we call those regulatory samples. Our state seed lab processes those samples, and then we would potentially take enforcement action if they don't come back within a certain standard from what's on the label. So we want to, it's to enforce labeling requirements and make sure that growers are receiving what they're what they believe they're purchasing. So again, currently only Colorado is the only other one that is doing that at this time. So we haven't gone down that path yet in California, but I want growers to be aware that these requirements exist, and if there's anyone with questions on seed labeling or on the requirements for seed, they can let our staff know and they can contact us, and we'll try to help work through them. But that is something as we move towards hemp, with, again, with the intent of the industry of making it a general agronomic crop, these types of requirements will be required of seed, of hemp seed as well. And so we will be applying those laws and regulations moving forward. So just wanted to keep people aware and keep this information available. So all the board members have this. Again, it's pretty brief, and if there's additional questions, we can answer them. Okay. It doesn't look like there's anything from the public either, so.
All right, so moving forward until the board, after we take a minute of public comments, we're going to talk about the next meeting and also agenda items. So I guess just to set the tone for that, Allison, Richard, and the 5 subject matter experts to have that meeting probably, I know the public as well as other influences in the state want this board to meet more often than not, and so it would be great to just give some time to get your findings. It's very important. It's very important we understand these findings before this board comes together again. Just so the public knows that. So open it up to the one last time for the floor.
Eric, before public comment, it's Tom Pierce. I would ask Josh. You came up with a simple form for a farmer to register for planting industrial hemp. I was wondering if you could come up with a similar steps that they could follow, list like I asked earlier of those institutions of higher learning that will sponsor this farmer, will allow him to plant industrial hemp this spring. Maybe another you set up this special meeting on the testing. Just as urgent is getting the ag commissioners on board with what will allow them to receive this registration form or help a farmer fill out this registration form for spring 2018 planting. How does that happen? Are you able to put that together, concise, step-by-step?
So there's 2 questions there. So first off, on the established agricultural research institutions, we don't have oversight over them, so we can't really put together a list of who's willing to participate and who's not. They don't necessarily let us know. We've had communications with the UC, and we're continuing to do that. But for those of you that are familiar with your local UC extension offices, and Van is here representing those extension offices, so you can talk to him about what they're able and willing to do. I mean, it's a good question, but it's an answer that we don't have.
Like I said, personally, I've got some pushback from them, and there's hopefully somebody out there that can provide that avenue for a farmer to take to get some seed planted this spring.
Yeah, and then again,
the ag commissioners need help. You know, we always talk about the funding thing, but I'm just saying just the help they need to accept this registration and application for planting.
Sure, and as far as registration, again, we need to go through the rulemaking process for the fees before the commissioners can actually charge a fee and start to register people. So that's something that we're working on offline and we'll continue to work on. With regards to what the commissioner needs, we'll certainly talk to Rick about what else the commissioners need from us to try to keep things moving forward and get the information to them. That's something we'll continue to work on. Rick, do you have a?
Well, to follow up on a comment you had made earlier as far as getting that out, would you or one of your staff members be able to email that template out to all the ag commissioners for comments?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, we can provide that to you and to Gary, and you guys can distribute it as you see fit as far as your normal procedures. Cool.
Thank you.
Rick, do you think, again, does it make sense for information to go out to all the ag commissioners in the state, providing a meeting to help them understand what needs to be done to help the farmer get this spring planting in?
Well, I receive questions weekly from growers all over the state, out of country, as well as commissioners regarding the industrial hemp program. We do have a spring conference coming up, but I do send out my minutes and my thoughts and my comments to the California Agricultural Commissioners and Sealers Association of all 58 counties. I also sent everyone the information concerning today's meeting and as far as the link to be watching. So I would expect to have questions when I get back to the office this evening.
So if a farmer showed up at your office or made an appointment with you and had a MOU from a college or somebody that would support him growing, you could go forward?
Well, to echo what Josh just said, that I would encourage them to have open communication with me, but they wouldn't have to do that. But I've had 8 to 10 growers locally have expressed interest in participating in agricultural research. I know that there was correspondence that I had received from Eric as far as outreach that I provided to all 58 agricultural commissioners, as well as my local farm bureau and my grower meetings that we conduct. And I've had personally 8 to 10 growers have expressed interest and reach out to Eric as far as some research projects that he's working on the side. I don't know if they've come to any fruition. I've asked my growers if they are going to be growing in my county to please let me know if they want to do that, but it's totally up to them.
Yeah, I mean, we do ask the growers work with the county agricultural commissioners as much as possible. Again, I mean, they may not have the ability to, they don't require registration, we don't require notification, but we do recommend working with the commissioners and the commissioners, as we are certainly willing to try to coordinate and assist wherever we can.
I'm assuming, again, Rick, that you would want the approval of the County Board of Supervisors to move in this direction, or they have to be on supporting you in this
And
plan?
I have informal support. We have not addressed this in a Board of Supervisors setting through a public meeting. I have informally talked to 2 board members concerning this matter. I've talked to my county council. We currently have an ordinance that prohibits the growing of cannabis outdoors. But as far as restricting industrial hemp, I've been told that our ordinance restricting cannabis does not prohibit the planting of industrial hemp. The 2 board members that I've talked to, in my opinion, seem to be okay with industrial hemp. But again, our ordinance is silent on that, and until somebody brings it forward, either publicly allowing that or publicly prohibiting that, that has not been addressed.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, public comments. Anyone, now's your moment to have the floor. Please speak into the mic. There's a lot of people listening at home watching the link here. It's not just for our deaf ears. So.
Yeah, Kathy's coming around, and Kathy is timing people.
Lane LeBay in Plumas County, and I can just about bet that if I start CBD production in my county with a moratorium, that I'm going to get a visit from you-know-who, which is fine. And, you know, we would do everything we can to work with our county commissioner. But one thing I would be concerned with is that if we see significant CBD hemp production, it might create a backlash with the community who can't distinguish between the THC plants and the CBD plants.
Hi, Wayne Richmond, California Hemp Association. First off, since it's closing comments, let me just thank all of you for your time and effort in being here. I know it takes you away from your regular business and duties, and we all do appreciate it. Having said that, we do hope that we'll see you meeting weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever's necessary to get the next steps done. And with that in mind, I just got a piece of information that I'd like to share with you all. The California Hemp Foundation has an MOU with an established agricultural research institution that is signed as of about an hour ago. I have a copy of it. So all of those who want to jump in and get going, contact me. We're ready to sign MOUs and start the research. Thank you.
George Bianchini. I'd also like to advise people to still be careful. The law says you can do it, but there are certain boards of supervisors and other politicians who don't necessarily obey the laws of California. And so we ran into the problem by, as a courtesy, notifying the Department of Agriculture, the Sheriff's Department, the DEA. They all came to the grow, passed all the DEA tests. And then all of a sudden there was some rules, and behind closed doors, they made a ruling. In the middle of the night, they came and bulldozed everything because it was marijuana. They said they couldn't tell marijuana between hemp. Yet later in the same meeting, the sheriff's associate admitted that the test came back as hemp. So what I'm getting at here is they flatly broke the law in a public meeting, and we've launched a lawsuit. It's very expensive to do those sort of things. It would be much easier for all of us to come together so that it can be solved between the folks that are pushing to make the rules of this versus the folks that are trying to stop the implementation. And quite frankly, if it's at a state level, I believe any of those officials should be immediately fired and maybe even prosecuted. It's a law in the state of California, we can grow industrial hemp. The law is very plainly put. Many of us that grew this coming year, this last year, didn't break any of the new regulations that you folks haven't made yet. So the faster you get those regulations out, the sooner we can abide by them. Otherwise, the law has a very clear path right now of what has to be done. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Boucher. Want to touch real quick on the testing. I would also like to possibly get SC Labs involved, or at least have somebody from the board reach out to them. I've bought in probably over the last 2 years 4 50 packs. That's 200 tests from SC Labs. I buy my testing in 50 packs because we counter test and test our products and the efficacy of them. It's just our standard SOP. And when we get products in, we counter test everything. So I had a meeting with them on Monday, and SC Labs is now set up a division for industrial hemp. The problem is their protocols and the way they have to handle it and move the material. I won't get into detail, but maybe somebody from the board can reach out to them. They're based in Santa Cruz. I wasn't happy with them because my 50 pack at $50 per test, which I paid them up front, they want now over $100 for a cannabinoid profile and $100 for a terpene profile, up from $50. So they were either going to give me my money back or I'm just going to pay the double increase. However, they do have some protocol and measurements that might help you guys out. And last but not least, if somehow we can have the committee here, the advisory board, put some timelines on the CDFA and really just be able to share that information with us, whether it's the registration or the application or stuff we've talked about, because, you know, again, is this going to take 3 months, a year? And I think if they can make a motion and put some timelines on some of the issues we spoke about, and that's all I have to say.
Any other public comments? Going. Opportunity window is closed. All right, thank you everyone for those public comments here. Yes, lots of work ahead, many things to be decided. As far as getting things done from a logistical perspective, if you want to grow this spring, if you want to plant in 3 weeks, my strongest recommendation is you find either a college or a private agricultural research institution in the state. You don't need registration. You don't need testing. You do need that, though. You do need to have some type of affiliate partner to work with. If you want to grow hemp in the next 4 weeks, that is really your only clear path to do anything right now. There has been legislative verbiage submitted across the street, so that's good. That means something as that ball is officially began to roll. A lot of things are going to come down to the county councils, really having a good open floor dialogue with the county board of supervisors and the county ag commissioners. It's at that point they'll be able to learn from the industry, from other people just talking about what that program might be like to actually charge people. And so there's certain things that this board can do, and there's a lot of things that we cannot do. We can only advise. And so in going forward, putting together this subcommittee for testing protocols is very critical. It's very important. And so for that, you know, for the next meeting and calling for the next meeting again for this advisory board. Now, there are certain things that we just cannot do as an industry until legislative verbiage gets fixed or the testing protocols from the subcommittee are actually defined. And so it's important that we allow Richard and we allow Allison the time and the resources needed to put a subject matter expert team together, allow for that time to have a public open meeting. Realistically, that does take about 3 to 4 weeks to get done. So it's already January 18th right now. We're looking at probably that Thursday after Valentine's Day. About a month from now, we want to, as an advisory board, as an industry, take all the feedback from those subject matter experts and from Allison and Richard, and then bring this advisory board back together as a whole. So my recommendation going forward with this Industrial Hemp Advisory Board is having this meeting. Also, it's important for internal workings for the CDFA. They are hiring someone to take this role. So we actually will have a dedicated personnel. By the way, Cal Cannabis, the Bureau of Cannabis Control, they have over 100 people dedicated to these conversations. Josh and Carl, they manage everything else, and then hemp was thrown on their desk. So the public is frustrated, and I'm frustrated too, and there just needs to be more resources and more capital to go around. The CDFA will be hiring someone in the next 30 to 45 days. It's imperative that that person is knowledgeable and educated on the complexities of this industry in this state alone. And so my recommendation for this advisory board to meet again will be exactly in almost 60 days, March the 15th. That does not miss planting for anyone in this state. It will allow some more definitions to come across as far as testing protocols. We need that feedback from subject matter experts. The subject matter experts need your opinions too, the public. And then the advisory board can come back. Remember, we're just consultants to the CDFA here. We need to gather all this feedback. In doing this timeline this way, that will allow for more information to come about as far as the completion of these registration templates. Unfortunately, Rick did have another meeting, but Rick has, everyone is listening. I want you to know everyone is listening in the state right now. The CDFA knows that there's timelines. The CDFA is doing a very good job with the limited amount of resources just to even organize some of this information here for us. So I want comments from the board. What do you guys think? You know, we can meet every single Thursday. I just don't know what good that'll do because there's only so much this advisory board has the power and capacity to move this forward. And so right now, this pickle of a window, we're in the early stages. We just are. And so how do we take that next step forward, Tom?
Yeah, Eric, I think, again, my point is to help a farmer. There's farmers in the association that I manage. There's farmers in this audience and processors that need the help yes, I can plant this crop in this spring, and have a place for it to go. You know, there was several letters written to me and this board, in which I sent you copies of, and also Josh, and the questions they asked in there, you know, we need to address those, and that's something I want on this meeting, to get that information to them that they're asking me, because I can't tell them.
Right.
I don't know.
So to a couple points real quick. So the motions that this board has made and the actions that we're planning to take, those are going to happen offline whether the board meets or not. So those are going to continue to be done behind the scenes, and And we will continue to work on them, even if we don't have a meeting for another 6 months. We're going to continue to work on those things and then lead into those public processes. So those are already in motion and ongoing. If you have issues working with your local county agricultural commissioner and they have questions, please direct them to us. And we can talk to them and communicate with them and try to assist them any way we can. This can happen offline and we can try to move forward with those. And then, yeah, I think those were the 2 points I was going to try to make. Saying as far as having another meeting, it sounded like we were looking at hopefully having that working group meeting next month, if that's agreeable to the two of you. And then coming back to this board, Eric had suggested March 15th, if that works for the members. We can keep going through the process. At that point, we will have somebody who will be available to actually work on these minutes and work on these things and actually keep things moving. Does that work for the board?
That works. On a very uplifting note, I just so appreciate Alex coming here and talking about the protocols and what the CCIA is actually doing for seed stuff. That's very important. That'll eliminate some confusion as far as that goes. We do not really want to define what an established agricultural research institution is. There is good, from working with all these attorneys, it's good to be vague, but with prudence and caution. So, and actually in my last little bit regards to that before I get off the soapbox, no one is, very few people are paying attention to the 2018 Farm Bill currently being drafted. There's a company called GW Pharmaceuticals and some other very, very large people affiliated with the FDA and actually the FDA that do not want the flower part of hemp to actually go into your hands. Just know that they are literally pumping millions and millions and millions of dollars into that bill to maybe next year, after this farm bill is passed, that CBD sector will become even more in question. And so for the careness of the farmers that you work with, just understand there are risks. This is not a regulated industry federally, and we just have to operate with just prudence.
So real quick before we wrap up, so Tom, were you good with March 15th? And John, I didn't hear either of you. Sounds good. Okay. Yeah. We'll confirm with the other board members. We only have 6 of you here, so we only have half of the board approximately. So we will confirm and make sure that that meeting date looks good. And if things change, we will notify people. And then we'll work on an agenda and have that go out at least 2 weeks before the meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. It is
Yes.
1:48, and I call. Oh, yes.
It would be great if one would be on a Thursday and one on a Friday, or the opposite months. I'm just bringing that up for the future.
Well, if the board's available on Tuesday the 13th, that could be an option as well if the board wants to explore that. And we'll communicate with the board and figure out which date works for them and set the meeting date. But thank you for your comment. Thank you, everyone.
All right, everyone, safe travels home. Meeting adjourned.